and it's for everybody, right? Not just entrepreneurs. But if you ignore the spiritual dimension, you can lose your internal compass, right? So that's when things like burnout, anxiety, or hollow success start to creep in. So I think embracing spirituality just creates resilience. It reminds us that we're part of something bigger and helps us stay grounded, which is important because things inevitably get chaotic. So to me, it's just a baseline part of your overall health, and that's why I think it's important.
Yeah, you make it sound so simple.
Simple, but maybe not easy in practice, right?
My name is Jordan Harcourt-Hughes. I'm the host of the Sacred Stories of the Spirit podcast, and welcome to another episode. Today I am talking with Dr. Torrens, who is an award-winning professor of entrepreneurial practice and three-time Inc. 5000 entrepreneur. Most recently, he's the podcast host of The Total Entrepreneur, where he talks about the performance advantages entrepreneurs can gain by prioritising their mental, physical and spiritual health. I was really pleased to have a conversation on Dr. Torrens' podcast recently. I will include a link to that in the show notes. But in our conversation today, we are exploring the intersection of entrepreneurship and spirituality. We're talking about the importance of inner resilience, heart-brain coherence, and the role of intuition in business. Well, hi, John. It's so good to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, Jordan, my pleasure. Really good to be here.
Now, you sound like you wear a lot of hats. Tell me about that.
I do. So I have a really interesting professional life in that on one hand, I'm a practicing entrepreneur with a business that spans healthcare and education. We work with young kids with disabilities in outpatient clinics, home health programs, and integrated preschools. And I'm also a faculty member at the Syracuse University Whitman School of Management, and I teach entrepreneurship. So I get to practice entrepreneurship, I get to teach it, I get to work with amazing students, and for me, it's a really great professional life.
Yeah, sounds amazing. Now, you and I have had a conversation before, and I love the conversation because we talked about entrepreneurship, and what I heard from you was a different type of entrepreneurship. I feel like you're kind of moving it into such an interesting space that I really wanted to have this conversation on Sacred Stories of the Spirit, because I feel like there's some real crossover there between the way that you're approaching entrepreneurship and the things that I'm interested in talking about, which is how we start to bring more sacred stories into our working life. So I wanted to ask you what you think is valuable in the conversations about spiritual life that is valuable for entrepreneurs.
Yeah, and it's for everybody, right? Not just entrepreneurs. But if you ignore the spiritual dimension, you can lose your internal compass, right? So that's when things like burnout, anxiety, or hollow success start to creep in. So I think embracing spirituality just creates resilience. It reminds us that we're part of something bigger and helps us stay grounded, which is important because things inevitably get chaotic. So to me, it's just a baseline part of your overall health, and that's why I think it's important.
Yeah, you make it sound so simple.
Simple, but maybe not easy in practice, right?
That's a good clarification, because simple is often not easy. Simple is often, there's a lot of deep work that goes on behind it, I think. So yeah, good. But if entrepreneurs want to work to these holistic measures of success where they can say, I feel balanced, I feel good, I feel like I'm living the right life, even in the challenges of entrepreneurship, how do they go about that? What's the way that you encourage your students and your peers to help going down a path of defining that?
I think it starts by asking yourself questions, right? Deep questions like, am I proud of how I'm showing up each day? Do I have energy for the people I love? Do I feel aligned with my work? Things like that. So you could do things like journaling around these questions. You could track your own coherence physiologically and emotionally using, biofeedback or just, meditative practices. And looking at success as something multidimensional, not just financial, because you could be, and you probably know people who are very financially successful, but they're not very successful in relationships or in family, or they're not generally happy, right? So I think trying to broaden the definition of success is really important to include not just business and financial success, but mental, physical, spiritual health and success as well.
Yeah, I love that. You talked about biofeedback and coherence. Tell me a little bit more about how that works.
It's really interesting. There's an incredible amount of really good research and science around what they call heart-brain coherence. So the HeartMath Institute has done a lot of research about the connection between the heart and the brain. And the heart actually sends more information to the brain than vice versa. So by focusing on your heart and doing practices like heart focused breathing, you're able to tap into intuitive intelligence that you might otherwise leave on the table. So there's heart rate variability monitors that you can measure your own heart coherence. And it's really interesting in that, so you can measure it in yourself, right? Which is great. You can see how coherent your heart signal is or your heart rhythm is. And when you're more coherent, the signal can get through the noise, if that makes sense.
Yes,
The other thing that's
absolutely.
really cool is we know that our heart field extends at least 3 meters from our body, whereas our brain, the electromagnetic signals from our brain only extend about a meter, or at least that's how far we can measure them. But our heart center emits an electromagnetic signal that extends at least 3 meters. We think it extends more, but our instruments are only sensitive enough to really get it 3 meters. So like if you've ever walked into the room and just felt the vibe, that's what you're picking up. And it's really cool. Actually, there was a study that 4 people at a table, 3 of the people were trained in coherence techniques, right? Like heart focused breathing or something very simple, right? And the fourth person was not. The fourth person was sent to the table in more of an incoherent state, maybe a little stressed or something. The 3 other people at the table quietly, silently practiced a heart coherence technique. They had them all hooked up to heart rate monitors. The fourth person who didn't know any of the techniques, once the other 3 got into coherence, that fourth person, their heart rhythm got coherent as well without even knowing it.
Catching.
So we do affect the field around us, whether we know it or not, whether we mean to or not, whether it's positive or negative, whatever we're doing affects the field. So I think that's really important to understand. And especially for entrepreneurs, you can go into maybe a contentious meeting or a stressful situation and just get yourself into a more coherent state. You're going to affect the meeting and the outcome of the meeting and the relationship you have with the people in the meeting. So one really easy way to measure that is with a heart rate variability monitor.
Amazing. I mean, if I was talking in my own practice of spiritual language, I would call that attunement, and I would talk about the practice of attunement and how valuable it is. But for me, where I feel the barrier is if you were to say in an organizational context or a business context, I've felt this intuitively, or I have this intuitive sense of the landscape. I feel that sometimes isn't highly regarded or it doesn't land well. What do you think about that? Do you think the landscape is changing and we now have a better language for describing these things?
Yeah, I think so. I think we have the language because we have the tools to measure it more. And I get it, right? You don't necessarily want to put something into practice unless you're reasonably certain there's some sort of efficacy there, right? But in a lot of schools, universities, business schools, we don't pay a lot of attention to that because it's not considered like hardcore business science.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
but when you interview successful entrepreneurs, they will most likely talk about their gut feelings and their
Yes.
intuition and how they followed that intuition to success. Yet, from an educational standpoint, we're not teaching that, we're not tapping into it. So there is a disconnect there. But yeah, I think it's becoming more and more accepted, even though it's probably not going to have the same place at the table as business analytics or something like that. But I do think there is becoming a place for it.
Yeah, and I do like the idea that there is starting to be a place for that because it would be nice to feel that that is a commonly accepted explanation or there's a way to have a dialogue about it. And if you've got these coherence tools, I think that's a really nice step to at least say, well, there is actually a way to kind of get a diagnostic of this to, for a better word.
Yeah. And, you don't necessarily have to lead with, hey, I've got a gut feeling or I've got an intuitive
Yes.
sense, especially if you're reading the room and you get the sense that these are hardcore data hounds who are not going to accept that,
Yes.
right? But you could just use your intuition to ask questions and then, evaluate the data that comes from that. And that could be a starting place.
Yes, I love that. Do you think it's hard for entrepreneurs to stay true to their inner compass with everything that they have to kind of think about and do in their work lives?
I think it depends on the entrepreneur, right? So, some people certainly can because they just have that inner compass and it's set. And I think it depends why you're engaging in entrepreneurship in the first place, right? I mean, if you're there to solve a big problem that you care a lot about, and that's what's guiding you, and we can see that as examples in entrepreneurs all the time, right? If you have a mission and a vision and you're solving a problem that you care a lot about, you can hold that line a lot better than if you just want to get in it to make a little bit of money or something like
Yeah.
that, right? Because you don't necessarily have a real destination. You're just there for a financial gain, which is great. Absolutely nothing wrong with that, but it's just a different approach.
What do you see in the mix with the students that are coming through your courses? Do you think that they're mostly there because they've got the big ideas or mostly there to make the big bucks?
I think it's pretty evenly split.
Yeah.
among the students. But I can tell you that, Gen Z and the students that I work with, they do they do care a lot
That's
about
good.
things, bigger global issues that affect themselves and community. So yeah, I think from my position, the students that I work with, I'm really fortunate that they're very passionate about the problems they're trying to solve
Yeah.
and the way they're trying to solve them. It probably reflects the larger population, but I am lucky that I work with students who do care a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. Now, do you think that there's a link between, some of the grounding practices that we might think about as well-being techniques, such as meditation and mindfulness, with entrepreneurial success? What's the connection there?
Yeah, there is quite a bit of research about that. I mean, meditation is one of the more researched practices out there. So we do know that when you have those types of practices, grounding, meditative, mindfulness practices, you are more innovative, you're more creative, and it's possible that it's because it allows you to tap into your intuition. You establish and maintain better relationships, which is super important as an entrepreneur, right? Your team and your customers, they mean everything to you. So being able to do that is going to accelerate your success and your ability to stay in business and do well. So yeah, I think the entrepreneurs or the executives that have some sort of practice like that, whatever it looks like, they're going to be more resilient. They're going to be guided by their inner compass more. So I think it's definitely important. And there is plenty of research that kind
Yeah.
of points us in that direction.
And you've had your own journey as an entrepreneur, starting companies and leading. And how did you find that journey yourself?
Well, I mean, I don't really have much to compare it to because that's all I know, right? But to me, yeah, there were times where it was very difficult. There were kind of seasons to it, right? So when you're starting out, it's all encompassing, it's very stressful, it's intense, and it goes up and down, right? Like everything in life. But luckily, I'm at a point now where it's much less stressful and it's much less intense, and I can handle it better. I think because I've worked on my own resilience and my relationships and that sort of thing. So it's been amazing for me, although it's been difficult, right? So, and that's something I think people would benefit from understanding, right? It doesn't necessarily mean it's easy, or it shouldn't be easy, right? Because if the goal is joy and happiness, we know that the easy life doesn't often bring you joy and happiness, right? You think it might, but it doesn't. Really, what brings us happiness and joy is a feeling of satisfaction and a sense of meaning. And satisfaction comes sometimes from doing hard things, right?
Yeah.
Things that you may not enjoy in the moment, but are especially satisfying when you're done, right? It's a difference, between different types
Yeah.
of well-being or happiness. So I think doing hard things leads to satisfaction, which leads to more of a sense of joy and happiness.
It's a nice equation. Thank you. Okay, well, listen, I have a few quick questions for you, which are really about you and how you kind of live and your practices that have helped you evolve, I guess,
Okay.
throughout your career. So, what is one practice that you think has changed your life?
Yeah. So honestly, I think it's the heart coherent breathing or the heart centered breathing that I learned through heart math. It's such a simple practice and technique, but it's really profound when you just get into that heart rhythm. So I really appreciate that a lot. But I started surfing a few years ago, and that's an amazing daily ritual. Like when I'm in Costa Rica, I get
Yeah.
to do that. And you're in the water, you're absorbing negatively charged ions, you're looking at the sun. I mean, you're having a good time, you're focused on what you're doing. So for me, that practice is amazing because I get out of the water. I'm in the water pretty early. I get out of the water and I've already done something that I really wanted to do, and I can attack the day and I feel amazing. Heart centered breathing, heart math techniques, and some sort of movement. In my case, it's surfing. I really enjoy it.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I love the idea that if you do something early in the morning, then the day is done. Like, whatever happens in the rest of the day, you've already claimed it and you've already had that
Yeah.
kind of that joyful
Yeah.
moment. So I think it's nice,
Yeah.
a great way to start. In Sacred Stories of the Spirit, a lot of the things we explore are stories, the stories we tell ourselves and the stories we tell each other. And the fact that our story of self can evolve over time, and that my feeling is that we should embrace it and not feel that our story of self needs to be static or carved in stone, because we are evolving creatures. So, do you have a story of yourself or your life that you remember holding on to, as part of your identity, and then going through a phase of realizing that you didn't need that story anymore?
Of course, we all do, right? We all have these mistaken beliefs about ourselves, and we probably don't even know why, right? But for me, like a lot of people, it's just, I'm not good enough, right? Well, who am I to start a business? Who's going to want to do business with me? It's the I'm not good enough mistaken belief, which drives all this behavior And in some cases, it's productive. It lets you succeed, but in the back of your mind, it's kind of pathological, right? Because you're constantly trying to disprove this mistaken
Yeah.
belief that you're not good enough. When at the end of the day, if you just could accept the fact that you are, you'd be okay. Now, I wouldn't necessarily change it because it got me where I am, but finally understanding that, yeah, I am good enough. Of course I am, right? How do you define that anyway? Is life changing. So that, for me, that's my biggest mistaken belief.
Yeah. How far along were you in your career before you realized that you could let that one go?
Maybe just a year or two ago, probably. It's something that, I mean, it sticks with you, right?
Yes, it
You
does.
constantly think that. And the world, when you think that, the universe kind of conspires to prove you right. And it's not until you realize that isn't true that the universe conspires to prove you right. So
Yes.
it's a mindset.
I love that. And I just, I love the idea that the universe conspires to work with you, rather than
Mhm.
against you. So even as you said, even if that means picking up on the self-talk that you already have to help you prove it, it's incredible
Yeah.
how deeply that goes. Do you have
Yeah, well, I
any?
mean, if you think your thoughts have vibration and frequency, right? And we know resonance is a fact. So you're vibrating and sending messages and signals out to the field that you're not good enough. That's what you're going to get back. Those are the things you're going to attract. So it's not until you change your thoughts and that vibrational pattern that you start to attract feelings that maybe you are good enough, or whatever the opposite of your mistaken belief or story is.
Yes, I'm interested in that sense of thoughts and the connection to vibration and the connection to the field. How do you think about that? And how do you think about your own kind of actions? I guess you've kind of explained it, but for me, vibration is really an embodied sensibility. It's a felt sense, but thoughts are a mental experience. And so I'm interested in that connection, how our thoughts change our body's vibrational state.
Yeah, it's really cool. Like we said before, your heart emits an electromagnetic field. Your brain does too. And these vibrations, we can measure them. As a matter of fact, we can measure emotions, and more coherent emotions are the emotions that feel good: love, joy, appreciation, gratitude. The incoherent vibrations, the ones that are more jagged and less regular, those are the emotions that don't feel good: anger, fear, frustration. So you can actually look at a picture of a graph of these heart rhythms, and there are signatures, right? Like you could look at these and say, okay, oh, that looks like joy, that looks like fear, and so on. So you could actually read these. Like, you don't have to necessarily feel them, you could see them. So to me, and I am the kind of guy who sort of needs proof, right? Like I kind of can buy into it. I'm like, yeah, all right, that kind of makes sense, but maybe not for me. But like when you see it and there's science that backs it up, then it becomes much harder to just brush off, right? So if you can see the rhythm of joy versus fear, and you learn the tools to get yourself into a rhythm that's more joyous than more fearful, then everything you experience becomes aligned with that rhythm. So it's really a very physical thing. It's not woo woo. It's not just, emotional or whatever. It is actually a physical phenomenon. And these vibrations, they don't just go out linearly, right? They're three-dimensional. So they saturate the field around you, and that's what you'll attract.
Signature of joy. How fantastic is that? I love it.
It's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very fantastic.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you about your favorite daily ritual. I'm guessing that's surfing.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I get to do it, that is what I look forward to. I hate to admit it, but I might get a little cranky if I don't get to, or or something like that. Or like, I'll come home after a session and my wife will say, "Oh, it wasn't a good session, was it?" Because she could just tell, right? But even a bad session is not that bad. But yeah, it's a really it's a joyful experience for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you have anything else that you like to do daily? So do you have a favorite place to be where you do your best work or your best thinking that kind of generates the best ideas? What does that look like for you?
I used to try to find just the right spot, right? There's a spot in my office or on my deck or something, but what I've been trying to do is just do it wherever I am, right? So that way, like if I'm in a tense meeting, I don't need to just remove myself and go to my safe space to get into
Yeah.
coherence, right? I can just do it on the fly in the
Oh,
wild, as I like to say.
yeah.
So yes, I used to have those
Yeah.
places, but now I'm trying to just be able to make my place wherever I am. And I think for me, that's been very functional because I'm not relying on a special place. Now, I love special places, right? I love being near the water. I love being at the beach. I love being outside in nature. I love being surrounded by trees. But I'm not in those circumstances. I'm usually not in those circumstances when the most stressful things are going on, right? So trying to embody those practices when I am in the wild or in stressful situations, that has been super important and very helpful
Yeah.
for me.
Finding coherence in the wild, I think that's a fantastic way to think about it. So if you are in one of those stressful situations, whether it's a meeting or, anything like that, it's hard to really kind of stand up, go and stand in the corner and do a 3-minute meditation to get your sensibilities back. So
Mhm.
how do you do it without interrupting the energy of what's going on? Or maybe you want to interrupt the energy of what's going on.
No, you can literally breathe your way into a heart coherent
Mm,
state. It doesn't take that
yep.
much. Just, 3 or 4 breaths that are maybe a little bit deeper, a little more rhythmic than usual will usually get you into more a coherent
Yeah.
state. And if you kind of focus on the center of your heart as you're doing it, and more importantly, think of a more joyful emotion or a heart focused emotion like gratitude or something positive while you're doing all this, that emanates the electromagnetic field that's more productive and so on. So you can do it right there at the table in a meeting that's going sideways. The other person may not even know. It may look like you're breathing a little bit deeper, but that's kind of natural in a contentious meeting or a
Yeah.
stressful meeting, right? So just doing some deeper breathing, focusing on the area of your heart, breathing a little more deeply and rhythmically than usual can get you
Yeah.
there.
Fantastic. What is the most surprising lesson that you've learned in your journey as an entrepreneur?
Well, so I think one of them is that nothing is permanent. Nothing lasts forever, right? So when things are really tough and it seems like it's the worst thing that could possibly have happened to you or your company, that is temporary. You'll get out of it. And likewise, when things are amazing and you're riding high, it's good to know that that won't last forever either. So it just kind of puts you in a more humble place. So yeah, I think just knowing that nothing is forever has been
Yeah.
really
Yeah,
helpful for
lovely.
me.
Yeah, thank you. All right, well, that's the end of our quick five. So well done. Thank you for answering those questions about your own journey. Going
Sure.
back to the entrepreneurship landscape, I think you've talked a lot about resistance. What do you think are the tools to manage resistance, and how do you think that plays out for entrepreneurs?
Yeah. So yeah, resistance to me is a signal, not necessarily a stop sign. So it'll show up as
Yeah.
procrastination, distraction, overworking. For me, it often comes up when I'm about to step into something bigger that maybe I can't see clearly at the time, or it also will show up when it's just something that I'm either not good at or don't want to do. For me, resistance and procrastination are not really negatives, but it's information.
Yeah,
All
nice.
right. It's telling me something. So maybe I need to delegate this, or maybe I just don't really want to do it. This is my intuitive self or my intuitive intelligence telling me that this isn't something I need or want to do, and somebody else could or should do it. So I think it's important to embrace it, to observe it, and just kind of understand what it's trying to tell you and go from there. But in my case, it usually means that I shouldn't be doing it. Or that's in the case of, something that I'm maybe not good at, but it also just kind of tells me that I need time to think because there's something there that I can't see all of yet, right? And I'm not going forward with it because I'm just not quite ready. So that's usually what it tells
Yeah.
me.
Do you think there's resistance to going inwards in business life in terms of taking that time to do the inner journey and the reflection to land what some of those things might be telling you as they come up?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, especially nowadays, right? There's this myth or hero worship about people who just grind 24/7. And if you're not doing that, you're losing, right? But we know that some of our best insights come when we just stop and are quiet and silent, right? When you surf or meditate or
Yeah.
journal or something. So we need entrepreneurs or more entrepreneurs who understand that slowing down is actually the power move, right? It's not just grinding more and sacrificing yourself to hit that next milestone or whatever it is. Like slowing down and going inward is the power move to me.
I love that you're in a position to help educate entrepreneurs about that. I feel like if we're doing that, we're moving in the right direction.
Actually developed a course.
Yes, please tell me about that. It's amazing.
That's great.
Even just hearing a little bit about it makes me think that you are exactly the right person to be leading the next generation of entrepreneurs because it's such exciting stuff.
Well, thanks. And that actually helps my I'm not good enough
Yeah.
mistaken belief, right? Because a lot of times you're like, "Ah, I'm teaching entrepreneurs, but who am I? What have I done, right? And even though objectively, if you look at me on paper, I've done some cool stuff, right? But just getting over that and getting over the imposter syndrome, even at 57 years old or 30 something years in business, it's still there, right? And I think students can relate to that. But the rationale or the reason or the motivation for the course was, in most universities, at least in the US, we're seeing that students are more anxious, they're feeling less connected, their overall happiness has been plummeting. And one of the things we're trying to do as a university or as a school management is address this. And, we tend to focus on mental health, which I think is really good. I'm not a mental health practitioner or anything like that, but I can certainly help in other ways, right? Especially when it comes to adding or giving them resilience techniques and practices. So I proposed a course it's called Entrepreneurial Wellbeing, Principles for Resilience and Performance. And I'm really proud that the school was all on board. They loved the idea. They embraced it because they see the trends too. And, we want students who are joyful and happy, not, anxious and disconnected, right? So I developed this course. It's just a 2-week course in May after the regular academic year is over. But we focus on, the biofeedback through heart math techniques. We focus on things like Vedanta as a non-dualistic philosophy. We look at Stoicism. We look at, other practices. And, they get together in small groups, they journal, they share their reflections, and we just have a really meaningful discussion in class meetings about, what it means to succeed and, how do we measure that? How do we get around these societal pressures where you have to grind and hustle 24/7 in order to be that successful entrepreneur and so on. So I was really proud of the students for leaning in because, when I first started, you never know, right? Because they've been programmed and
Yes.
taught a certain way. And, these things don't often show up in traditional education, and they're not new things either. These philosophies and ideas have been around for thousands of
Yes.
years. We've just lost them and are now just uncovering them and realizing that there is a lot that we can learn and benefit from if we apply them. So the students really leaned into it. You could just tell on their faces that they were very, very happy that somebody is using this language with them, making it okay to talk about it. And I was just really happy with the students and their progress and reflections. Hopefully we'll keep doing it because it was truly a joy to teach that class.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. And I think I can see how the students would have loved it. On one hand, it's crazy that
Yeah.
it's not the most natural thing in the world that this is part of a curriculum. But on the other hand, it's beautiful to see that it's being really well embraced, and hopefully that means it does become a standard way of thinking about balancing a curriculum. So you're really taking into account this kind of work. I think it's very, very exciting. And I can't wait to see more of this kind of thing happening. So, John, do you have anything that you're working on or any projects kind of coming up that you'd like to give a nod to?
Well, I do have a podcast. It's called The Total Entrepreneur, Mind, Body, Spirit. And, each week we talk to different experts on, mental, physical, spiritual health. And really what we do is we talk about the tangible ROI in prioritizing your mental, physical, and spiritual health. Because, my position on it is that you are a human first. And then you're an entrepreneur. And if you can focus on being a healthy human, your entrepreneurial endeavors are going to be much more successful. And that's what we talk about each week. And a lot of really fun conversations.
Yeah, I love it. Well, thanks for joining me today, John. It's been a lovely conversation.
Thanks for having me, Jordan. It was really nice.
Well, I really hope you enjoyed our conversation today. I love Dr. Torrens' work. I'll provide some more information in the show notes about how you can find out more about what he does. And I can't wait for the next conversation as well. So next episode, I'm speaking with the wonderful Jared Broussard, who is a therapist in the greater Houston area. Jared is wonderfully humorous and quirky and nerdy. We geek out with all of his great tools for connecting with clients and having great conversations. He's a really wonderful human being, so stay tuned. He's coming up in the next episode next week, and stay well in the meantime, and I'll see you soon.